Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. Continuing our conversation on Rush, we've made it to Test for Echo, their 16th studio album released in 1996. This is the follow-up to Counterparts, and it is very much the natural evolution from Counterparts, I think. I think there's a very natural development from that album, and that it takes all the best elements of Counterparts, and it just pushes everything forward. Counterparts is obviously a very important album in that it reestablishes that heavy guitar-oriented sound. And by the time we get to Test for Echo, the band is in a much more confident mindset, I think. And so we get that heavy sound, but it's much more exploratory, much more adventurous, I think, which is really, really good. If there's a criticism to be made about Counterparts, for me, I think Counterparts is a little bit one-dimensional at times. It's got some great songs, but as a whole, the album kind of lacks a certain diversity. And, that's rectified to great effect on this album. I think this is a much more diverse album in many, many ways, actually. Obviously, from track to track, there's a great range of styles, but also there's a much greater range of instrumentation on this album. There's much more acoustic guitar on here, which is really good. Even though it still retains that heavy vibe, there's some really, really heavy riffs on this album, but there's a lot of acoustic as well, which is great. Again, it adds to that more diverse, sort of flavor. And there's even some moments where the synthesizers kind of make a cameo and they take the lead for a couple of moments. Not to nearly the same extent as in the '80s, but there's a couple of quick moments where it's like, oh wow, there's those synthesizers again. So it's almost like a kind of a summing up of all these different styles that they had played around with over the years, leading up to this album, which is really, really great. Geddy Lee does a lot more sort of background harmonies and whatnot to kind of create a cool texture, so that's also interesting. Also notable, of course, is Neil Peart. Prior to recording this album, he actually went and got drum lessons from a jazz great called Freddie Gruber. And I think that benefited his playing tremendously. Obviously Neil's always been one of the greatest influential rock drummers out there. He's a phenomenal drummer. But he plays with such a tight precision that he almost doesn't feel human at times. And I think, getting drum lessons prior to recording this album really loosened him up, and he sounds a lot more human. So that's really, really good. The groove is not quite so rigid, and that's great. He obviously still sounds like Neil Peart, but there's a certain change to the flow of the rhythm, I think, with this album. Very subtly, I would think. And he actually played traditional grip for most of the tracks on this album, so that's certainly interesting. But the songs themselves, obviously very notable with Test for Echo is that they're much more adventurous when it comes to the arrangements of the individual songs. To compare it to Counterparts again, a lot of the songs on Counterparts are very straightforward and direct, arguably fairly simpler than a lot of the other Rush albums. Where the songs on here are definitely more adventurous in terms of, there's lots of different parts to the songs, and there's a lot of, often in the course of one song, there'll be a really dramatic tonal or mood change. It'll go from a really heavy, crunching guitar riff to, a nice delicate, lush acoustic passage. So there's a great diversity within the songs themselves. And of course there's all kinds of cool time signatures and whatnot, so on the surface it almost sounds like Test for Echo is their glorious return to being a progressive rock band. And I wouldn't go that far personally. It's proggier for sure, but if you were to compare Test for Echo to Hemispheres or A Farewell to Kings, that would be unfair, because it's never going to hold up to those monumental classics. But it is really, really good, and I think in some ways it's becoming a lost classic, because they haven't really played a whole lot of the songs off this album, which I can't imagine why, because like I said, there's some really, really great songs on here. In addition to all the kind of proggy things like the tone changes and the mood changes and whatnot and the time signatures, there is still that emphasis on melody and songwriting and that more mature song craft. So it's on the whole, it is a really, really good album. Arguably, this could be the best of the '90s for me. It's a toss-up between Test for Echo and Roll the Bones, but they only did 3 albums in the '90s, so that basically just says Counterparts is slightly lesser than the other 2. But it's not a competition, obviously. That would be silly. Music is not about competition. The album cover is quite cool. I'm not sure how recognizable this thing is outside of Canada, but we call that an Inukshuk. And it's a thing that comes from the Inuit people that live very, very far north in the Arctic Circle in Canada, and they make these interesting human-like stone figures. So that's a bit of random trivia for you. I don't know much more about that, but you do see them all over Canada. And it's also got that snowy backdrop. It's a great album cover, actually. I quite enjoy it. It's a very happy album cover. It's very bright and colorful. But yeah, let's try dissecting these songs, shall we? So the album opens with the title track, "Test for Echo." Great track. It's very dramatic opening. Not too unlike Animate from the last album. We get these nice dramatic guitar arpeggios and some cool lyrics. Here we go, vertigo. Test for Echo. It's actually the last collaboration with Neil Peart and Pi Dubois, his most frequent lyrical collaborator. He did have a hand in writing some of the lyrics for the title track on this. And with Test for Echo, right away we get that kind of proggy vibe. There's lots of different riffs and there's lots of weird changes. The riffs are great. Once it breaks into that boom diddle doom 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 diddle doom diddle doom doom, great riff. And then the verse is kind of like a slight variation on the intro. So I mean, the arrangement is kind of hard to grasp at first, but after a few listens, it all starts to make sense. I really love that ascending bass line, the kind of madness part. Here we go, do 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 do. That's kind of a cool, crazy part. And again, proggier. It's nothing like a big epic or anything like that. But that sense of adventure is very apparent on that track. Great stuff. I am a fan of Test for Echo. Moving on to track 2, Driven. This is probably one of the closest things to a true classic on the album. It's one that was played for a couple of tours afterwards. It's funny, none of the songs on Test for Echo got played on the R40 tour, which I thought was quite strange. Who knows? Whatever. But yeah, Driven is a really, really good song. It's all about that riff. It's a riff in 15/8, I believe. So they didn't always write in sevens. But it's a really, really cool song. Again, we get that dramatic tonal shift. How it goes from that heavy riff to that really nice that chorus with the acoustic. It's my turn to drive. So that's really, really cool. Lots of variations as it goes along. There's at one point Geddy Lee takes the lead on the bass. That's really, really cool. The bridge is really great. I love that big, slow, dirging, heavy riff. That's a classic moment. And yeah, it's a great song. It steadily builds as well. That acoustic chorus by the end is in overdrive. So it's a great song. Definitely one of the classics of the album. Very start-stop. It's the arrangement is kind of all over the place, and that it's jarring in the way it stops, and then it starts up again. But that's what makes it great. There's a sense of adventure on that. Anyway, moving on to track 3, we got Half the World. This is a notably simpler song. The one that I would call the album track, one of the album tracks. And it's okay, it's very much in that, more traditional songwriting style. It's not as proggy, it's not as, there's not quite as many crazy things. There is a little bridge where there's some funny time signature businesses going on. But, yeah, it's an okay song. Not one of my favorites on the album. Definitely more in a commercial, accessible mood, which is fine, but not necessarily my taste. And then we get track 4, The Color of Right. For me, it's very much in the same vein as the previous track, Half the World, which is okay. Again, more commercial, more accessible. Classic Ernst Peart lyrics, but nothing. It's not one that's ever stuck with me or really stayed with me. But that's okay. I mean, it gives the album a nice sort of ebb and flow, if you like. It starts out with 2 high energy proggy tracks and then a couple of more poppy tracks. So adds to that diversity. We move on to track 5. We get Time and Motion. And this is a contender for my favorite on the album. I think this is really, really good. Probably, the most reminiscent of the prog years, I think. That big heavy riff in 5, dun 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 dun, And then it goes into that other part, boom, doom, 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 and then that's one of the moments where the synthesizer comes up, and we get those big I think the orchestra hit is the name of that patch. It's just mad. It's quite crazy. It's almost overwhelming with the right speakers, which is really, really cool. And it is just a heavy, dirging track once the song proper starts. And there's a great little melodic thing there with what's the line? Spontaneous elation and the long enduring kind. That's the line. I really, really like that. Like I said, one of my favorite tracks on the album. I love the bridge as well. It goes back into that heavy dun 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 dun, and it's a great juxtaposition between that heavy riff and then this sort of mystical arpeggiated piece. And there's lyrics about the moon. You know, the forest, the mighty forest dances with the moon, mighty ocean dances with the moon. Whatever. I'm not going to look at the lyrics to get them quite right, but that section is a real highlight. Great song, one of my favorites on the album. We move forward to track 6, Totem. Really, really good song, actually. This is another one of the poppier songs. Poppier, I say in quotations. But I really like this. I think Totem is much better than Half the World or The Color of Right, to my taste, anyway. You know, I love the lines. You know, angels and demons flying in my head. We get some of those nice oohs and ahs from Geddy in the background. And yeah, it's just a really, really, you know, well put together song. And even though, like I said, it is poppy and it is focused on the melody, the arrangement still kind of catches you off guard. You know, going between that, you know, energetic acoustic part, dun 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 dun. You know, that is quite a jump from the chorus, and I mean, and it goes through a whole, you know, a few different, you know, mood changes and whatnot. So it's poppy, but it's still adventurous, and there's lots of surprises in the arrangement. So that's really cool. Totem is definitely one of my favorite tracks on the album for sure. Moving on, track 7, Dog Years. Pretty fun track. The lyrics are quite fun, talking about dogs. Must have been, there's something going on in 95 and 96, because this song always reminds me of I forget the name of the song now, but it's on Roots to Branches from Jethro Tull, and it's a song about a dog as well that Ian Anderson wrote. And Dog Years is kind of a similar thing. It's a tribute to our wily pets, and there's some really funny lyrics in there. I love It's the Season of the Itch, of course a reference to Donovan and Vanilla Fudge with the song Season of the Witch, but Season of the Itch. Yeah, and it's a great track. It's almost, you know, parts of it almost have, you know, Rush does punk. You know, that first riff at the beginning. You know, there's almost that punk sort of a vibe to it, but it winds its way into a real nice, you know, a really nice track. I like the melody there. Dog years. It's very, very nice. Not one of my favorites on the album, but you know, certainly a good album track for sure. Then we get to track 8, Virtuality. Now, musically, this is a really, really strong song. I just love that riff. It's just hyperactive, heavy. Doom, 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 diddle, little, 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 doom, 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 diddle, little, boom, doom, 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 diddle. You know, just great stuff. You know, very high energy, very loud, very heavy, very guitar. That wonderful, you know, heavy Alex Lifeson tone is in full flight there. And it's just got a great arrangement to it. I love that the part where Lifeson's scratching, and there's some kind of neat little cowbell runs courtesy of Pierre, which is really nice. And yeah, it's a really, really good song musically. Lyrically, it's a little bit dated, of course. You know, it's talking about the wonders of the internet, but from the perspective of 1996. So, you know, certain lyrics on there just, you know, they almost feel a little bit awkward by today's standards. You know, things like put your message in a modem and send it out on a cyber sea. But you have to put yourself in that time frame. You know, 1996, the internet was this mind-blowing, you know, new thing. You know, the whole idea of having a home computer was just crazy. You know, I'm just old enough to remember when the home computer became a thing. And God, these are the days of dial-up, where, you know, it would take you 3 hours to log on to the internet, and then an additional hour and a half to go from one page to another. And that wretched sound. People that remember early days of internet will certainly recognize that horrible dial-up sound. But yeah, lyrically, Virtuality is about the internet, but as seen through a 1996 lens. But musically, very strong, one of the best on the album for sure. We move on to track 9, Resist. Another contender, for the Rush classic of the album. It's really, really nice, very much in a more of a ballad sort of a mood. But it's just really great, really strong lyrics. It almost has a folky sort of aspect to it. And I must say, the version of Resist on this album is far from my favorite version because, of course, in 2002, on the Vapor Trails tour, they did bring Resist back, but just as an acoustic duet between Alex and Geddy. Not really a duet. I think Alex might have done a couple of backing vocals here, but just 2 acoustic guitars, and it was after Pierre's drum solo, so he was off stage resting a little bit. And yeah, I think Resist, it does better with a sparser arrangement of just 2 acoustic guitars. I think the version on this album is a little bit too arranged. It really doesn't need the drums. It's all about the lyrics, and it's all about the melody, and it's all about those nice little licks. But it is a really, really good song, and certainly one of the classics of the album for sure. Moving on to track 10, we get Limbo, another Rush instrumental. The 90s were truly, it was the renaissance of the Rush instrumental in the 90s. Actually, they did more instrumentals in the 90s than they did in like the prog heyday, funnily enough. But Limbo is a really, really good track. If I'm honest, I would actually say that I think I like Limbo. It's the 3rd best Rush instrumental for me. I think in the Roll the Bones video, I said that if I were to list my favorite Rush instrumentals, it would be La Villa Strangiato, YYZ, and then Where's My Thing from Roll the Bones. But I think Limbo may work its way to the 3rd, and then Where's My Thing would be after, and then after that I guess would be Leave That Thing Alone from Counterparts. And we haven't even gotten to talking about the instrumentals on Snakes and Arrows, but we'll get to that eventually. I think my opinion will stay roughly the same. But Limbo is really, really, really cool. It's obviously not entirely instrumental because we do get some of those oohs and ahs from Geddy at one point, but that's one of the best moments of the song. That's a spine-chilling moment. Just that little melody does. And the song kind of slows down and whatnot, but got some great playing on there. It's a really good display of Pierre's, looser style, and there's a little jazz section in it, and you can hear it for yourself. If you compare his, Pierre's jazz playing on Where's My Thing from Roll the Bones, and then you put on Limbo, you can just tell he's looser. He's got it swings more than it gallops now, so that's definitely a good thing. But it's got lots of cool changes. It's fast and it's slow, and it's a great Rush instrumental. Limbo's a classic. I always forget about that one though. It's strange, and then when I hear it, it's like, oh, this is just so classic. So there you go. And then finally, wrapping the album up, track 11 is Carve Away the Stone, and this kind of follows the recent tradition of, at least at this point anyway, of Rush ending their albums with just another song. It doesn't have that sense of finality, or there's no grand epic at the end, or big send off. It's just a song, and it's a good song. I wouldn't say it's as good as some of the other stuff on the album, but it's a good song. Not the best, not the worst. It just ends with kind of an album track, which I don't know. They really seem to have a difficulty with ending their albums, starting probably at Presto onwards. They just kind of ended their albums with songs, just random songs. But that's okay. Ultimately, it is quite a good record, and of the 3 90s albums, this is probably my favorite one. So there you go. Quite sadly, not too long after the tour had finished up, Neil Peart's life was struck with tragedy on 2 separate occasions in a very, very short span of time. And subsequently, the band went on hiatus for 6 years. So it was the one moment in Rush's career where they were not active. But unlike most other bands, it had nothing to do with any infighting or bullshit or anything like that. It was just a very, very unfortunate and tragic circumstance that caused the band to go on hiatus for a little while. But they did reconvene in 2002, and they released Vapor Trails, which is the album I'm going to talk about next as we make our way to the very end of this long-winded Rush video chat series. So do stay tuned for the Vapor Trails video that'll be coming out sometime in the future. And thank you very much for watching me ramble near incoherently about Test for Echo. It is a great album. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and all that fun stuff. And until the future, you will see me then. Take care.